Welcome to Passionately Moderate. I'm your host, Mark Gordon. Today is January 17th, 2014. And today we're going to do our first political podcast. I am here with Lois Jane. She's part of the press corps that follows around Governor Christie. Lois, say hi to our audience for me.
Hello, audience. Very excited to be here. Lots to talk about.
Yeah, we do have lots to talk about. And, you know, how long ago did this story break, would you say?
I think it was Thursday of last week, and it has been a long 8 days since then.
So Thursday of last week, I didn't want to rush to do a podcast about this. I'm glad I didn't, because my feelings and my opinions on this have changed a lot over the last 8 days. I think I needed some time really to process it. So take me through what that's been like for you.
Well, I agree. We talked about doing this on Monday, and a lot has happened since then with the whole, this super committee that's been formed. We had the State of the State address where the governor vaguely addressed what's been going on Tuesday. It was interesting. He said, that this is not going to stop him moving forward, that he does need to continue with the bipartisanship. There were some other issues in his State of the State address, including the education, and we'll get to that, and as well as this new pension payments that and some people were saying that he's maybe trying to divert from what he's been going through. He's maybe trying to shift the focus a little bit away from him and talk about other things. And you say education, everybody's listening.
Okay, so this is the biggest scandal, I guess, of the Christie administration so far, and really in New Jersey politics in a little while. And I kind of felt weird about that in the beginning, because I sort of felt like we were making a big deal out of nothing with this scandal. That was my initial, and I think everybody in New Jersey, or a lot of people in New Jersey, feel like overall Chris Christie's done a decent job. He's got still got the goodwill from Hurricane Sandy and the way that was all handled. But as the stories continue to develop and I continue to read what's going on here, I feel like it's hard to make an argument that A, he wasn't involved in this or didn't know about it, and B, that it's not a really horrible thing, which, you talk about retribution here, or it's not often that you find a politician doing something specifically to get back at somebody or without any sort of real purpose or something to gain. There's nothing for him to gain from this. It was really just a retribution thing that was directly harmful to his own constituents. I can't think of another story like that.
Sure, it sounds childish on the surface. You say, a traffic jam. Well, okay, so people had to sit in traffic. It was political payback. Well, that's a child's game where you're trying to get back at someone for doing something. But there's a lot more to this. You're talking about ambulance rides that were delayed. You're talking about people who knows if they were trying to get home to their pregnant wife. That would be an extreme case. But you could see the pictures where people are standing out of their cars. So we're talking hours, and we've all sat in traffic on the GWB. It's not about just traffic on the GWB. It is about that political power struggle that everybody talks about. And we all hoped that we finally found a governor who was not all about these political games, and everybody was excited, and I think that's what everybody saw in Governor Christie, and I think that's why he was very well liked. But this brings about a whole new angle to this governor, that maybe he is getting sucked into that political world of power. It's all about power. I hate to say it, but the politics and power go hand in hand.
So, but again, it would be, I guess for me, if I thought that there was some attempt from Christie to say to the mayor of what town is it?
Fort Lee.
Fort Lee. So I was drawing a blank on that. The mayor of Fort Lee. Hey, when you endorse me, I will free up the traffic. Or if there was some kind of a play for a tangible benefit, I have an easier time understanding it. Quite frankly, what makes it so amazing to me is that it was literally just like, okay, you're not going to support me, I'm going to send a message. And that's a very strange thing that in this high level of politics to see. That's the part of it that feels childish, right?
Sure. It's pretty much catty, really, is what it is.
And I was reading about today there were 4 different ambulance services that were in different instances where where somebody died, they were being delayed because of the traffic. Kids who sat on school buses for hours in traffic in the first few days of school. So I guess what I'm saying is my initial feelings on this when the story first broke were leave Chris Christie alone. I almost wanted to defend him like he was my guy, and I feel like that for even a couple of days. Yeah. But as each day has gone on since then, I feel more and more betrayed. Really, the fact that my even my daily commute could be disrupted because of something catty, as you said, brings up some really strong feelings in me that I think are maybe even a first for me in politics, where I follow politics on a national level or a local level. The fact that I feel a little, it's just weird to me that there was nothing to gain. There's no other side to this story. If you know what I mean.
I agree, and you don't realize how much politics surrounds you, but it really does. It's almost Big Brother-ish, really. And I feel like that's a realization that a lot of people are getting from this, from the ambulances to the poor kids on the school bus. And you saw what they said in the emails. They're Buono's. They're children of Buono supporters.
Yeah,
I mean,
an amazing thing to say.
It's beyond anything that I could ever fathom, where you could sit and joke about children sitting in traffic for hours, yes, which is, so what, they sat there, but it's all for politics. That's all it is.
So you spent a lot of time, I've known you for a while, you've spent a lot of time covering the governor, and I don't know that you always agree with everything, all of his policies or politics, but I think in general you had a respect for what he was doing. I know that covering him during the election, with the exposure that you got there, you mentioned to me, that you kind of liked him as a guy. Does this scandal change your perspective of him as a person? Does it change your personal feelings, or even the way that you're going to cover him moving forward?
It won't change the way I cover him. You do it as objective as possible. I think it changes many people's opinions of him. As for my opinion, I try to honestly not to have one, because I do want to be objective, and I don't want to have that biased opinion of him where I feel one way, so therefore it skews my writing and it skews my reporting at all. So in that respect, yes. But on a personal level, I mean, you can't help but some people may say that they feel betrayed a little bit by this governor who they felt was different. He was supposed to be different. Rarely do you talk about New Jersey governors that are maybe on the path to being president one day, and I think we put him on this pedestal, and this is sort of knocking him down a little bit. People are realizing he might just be like the rest. Yeah,
I think maybe you're even understating it a little bit in terms of some of the reactions that I've seen, even through social media and things like that. I think some people feel a lot more than a little bit upset about this, and it's not just people on one side or the other. I think what made Christie special, at least in New Jersey, as far back as I can remember, I can't remember another politician from New Jersey who crossed over from one party to the other the way he did. There were a lot of Democrats for Christie in the state of New Jersey. But it's not just them. It's not just the people on the far left that are upset here. So here's my biggest question, and because I haven't seen as much of this, I've seen people kind of circling the wagons around Christie on the Republican side, defending him. What is the defense for this? Is there a defense for this? What is it? Just I just didn't know. I mean, is that the whole defense?
I had no idea.
That's it.
That's it.
I feel like I would have come up with something better than that if I was the governor.
I'm trying to think of the word. Oh, blindsided. I was blindsided at, I think it was 8:50 was the time, or 7:50. He had the time down, which actually I've been reading a few articles by people who analyze those who lie, almost like lie detectors, which are never 100%. Absolutely not. But the fact that he kept saying, I was blindsided, and he kept giving the times, and he kept saying that over and over in his 2-hour-long press conference, which I was there for, the fact that he kept repeating that, it sort of makes it a little less believable, according to this lie detector. Not on my behalf. I'm not, according to this apparent expert.
Okay. So
that's his defense. I was blindsided.
Yeah, it just, I can't think of another time, and I don't study local politics, or I'm not certainly involved in every governor and all these other places, but I follow the national politics pretty well. I follow New Jersey politics. I can't think of a time where people didn't come up with some sort, like, where there was no effort to like cover this up, really, like, or I guess there was an effort to cover it up, but a really poor one. I mean, when you're talking about high-level people inside the Christie administration sending text messages back and forth and joking about this, first of all, the text messages, they're using phones that are paid for by the taxpayers, right? So those text messages are
and
public
emails.
record, right?
Yep,
and emails.
And emails.
So
their work emails. And then it switched to their personal emails.
And how did we get a hold of those personal emails?
Subpoenas.
subpoenas, and a whole bunch of new subpoenas just came out yesterday and today. Is that correct?
They just subpoenaed 20 people. Their names have just been released. But let's go back to this. So Bridget Kelly says in an email, time to cause some traffic problems in Fort Lee.
So who's Bridget Kelly first?
Bridget Kelly is, as the media, she was always there. She was always in the forefront. She worked with us. But she was basically one of Christie's right-hand women.
Okay.
Right-hand man. So for her to say, time to cause some traffic problems in Fort Lee, I mean, come on. Say, hey, that thing we talked about, forward, you thumbs up, good to go. Something like that. I mean, honestly, stupidity is just a word that I can think of. I mean, and the governor, and this is where, see, I'm not sure whether or not the governor is necessarily quote-unquote guilty. He says that he had no idea, he was blindsided, but yet his entire inner office has been subpoenaed, and Mike Druniak is in the emails. Mike Druniak deals a lot with the press and is at Christie's side at all times. He's the one that called us all mutts. Yes, not many people happy about that. But going back to, so his entire inner office knows about this, so how are we supposed to believe that this man who is a former U.S. attorney who has a handle on pretty much everything? I mean, he always talks about how involved he is with his office, and micromanage is a word that's been tossed around a lot here, but Mike Druniak said that, the governor does not concern himself with traffic problems. But when it's the GWB, when it's during...
This is the most traveled bridge in the country, right?
Most traveled bridge in the country during 9/11 or right around it. I think the dates, I know it was early September.
It did cross over 9/11.
It did cross over. I think it was September 9th it started, I believe, or September 8th. Unfortunately, my brain is mush after this past 8 days or so my numbers are a little bit crossed. But so how he didn't know is bewildering to me. But he's not a stupid guy. He's a smart, intelligent man. So who knows what happened? I mean, we really, and I don't know if we'll ever know.
Well, so they're going to subpoena all these people.
Yep.
They're going to ask him, did he know?
They're going to plead the fifth, just like Stepien did.
But once you give them immunity, then they can no longer plead the fifth in that case, right?
So when Stepien was during this committee that they had, this hearing that they had, it was interesting because at one point, his attorney who was representing him, as he kept saying, I plead the fifth, he was, and I was at the governor's press conference at that time. We had another reporter over at that press conference. So I wasn't there firsthand, but I read everything, and I talked to the reporter that was there. So I basically got a firsthand view. So his lawyer actually said something about immunity. And hey, if you give Stepien immunity, you might get something out of him that you want to hear. And that was not reported. That was one report that I barely saw in the back of, I think it was the Star Ledger, that nobody's paid attention to, which is amazing to me, because if you give him immunity and he just blurts out everything that we want to hear, why would we not go forward with that? Is it because these political, now power players, like we were talking about with Wisniewski, do they want to draw this out so their name makes the headlines for who knows how long? That's a whole nother issue.
Yeah, so what happens if we find out? What happens if we do find out that Christie lied about this?
Impeachment is already being thrown around. But
is it really? It's being thrown around, but it's not really being seriously discussed at this point. So, impeachment was one of those things that even with Bill Clinton, they thought, and he was impeached, but
I agree. The Governor Christie, I doubt will ever be impeached. This will be drawn out for, we talked about weeks before. I think it's going to be months and months and months. And I think he's smart enough to have covered his tracks. If he's guilty of anything. But
even if he did this, what is the crime? First of all, the state is going, whether he knew or not, we're now going to see a ton of lawsuits against the state of New Jersey. You're already talking about the livery unions in New York City suing for lost wages and things like that because they got stuck on the bridge and not being able to get back and forth. And, those things may or may not add up to significant money, but the state's got to now pay people to defend against those lawsuits. And that is a real cost to taxpayers.
There's civil lawsuits from New Jersey residents against the Port Authority, against the governor's office right now. 6, I think it was the Friday after the governor's press conference that came out, and that number is going to go up.
So that's a real effect that's already had on.
I mean, the lawsuits are, I hate to say it, they're just
frivolous.
Exactly. I think the governor, all eyes are on the governor's office at this point. What exactly the crime is, I don't even think that they know, because Assemblyman John Wisniewski, who has spearheaded this entire investigation, he was one of the first people to come out with this. He got wind of it. Senator Loretta Weinberg was, I think, originally got wind of it, they had some conversations, and they really spearheaded this investigation. They carried this through when it was trying to be hush-hushed, and actually, former Governor Cody, said that some Democrats were trying to keep this on the hush-hush because they didn't want it to go against the governor. Some Democrats, which is a whole other issue. But
is that an issue, or is it just people?
There are so many issues that you don't even know where it begins and ends.
Well, do you have more of an issue with a Democrat helping cover this up than you would if a Republican was helping to cover it up, or is there something that's less easier, more difficult to understand?
It's not even a matter of parties, but I would expect Republicans to be obviously more defensive with the Republican governor. Yes. Does that make sense? Do you know what I'm saying?
I would. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I would expect that as well.
And if it was Democratic governor, I would expect the Democrats to be on the defense of the Democratic governor.
Yeah, it's hard for me to wrap my head around impeachment until I would know what formal crime you could even charge him with.
I mean, the Assembly,
not that it would take much.
The Assembly could technically vote to impeach him, and that doesn't mean anything really. They're just saying, "Hey, we would like to impeach the governor," but.
Was there a felony? Even if you found out that Chris Christie 100% did this and ordered it and everything else, is there a felony that was committed here?
The charges are unclear at this point.
Okay.
Because it could start at one place, and this whole thing has been unraveling, and as it unravels, more and more charges, I'm sure, could be tacked on.
So speaking of unraveling, which I think is one of the more interesting points to this to me, is that once you're involved in a scandal like this, it kind of opens the floodgates for everything else you've ever done. And we've seen that, I was reading an article today about Chris Christie's secret meetings with the Koch brothers in New York City, in Colorado, out in Vail with billion-dollar donors, and these other things and statements that Christie made. Do you expect other sort of groundbreaking things to come out that maybe are separate from Bridgegate, but now that the floodgates have been opened, people will investigate more of his actions on a regular basis? Do you think there's more to this or more coming? Do you get a sense of that from the press corps? The press corps, we have not honestly been really talking about that aspect of it. We've been talking about what has been concentrated on this past week. It's been a very busy week, and we have all been exhausted. Okay. So we haven't gotten to that point yet. But I think a lot of New Jersey residents are asking, where does this end? And is there a possibility that the governor has taken part in, do you want to call them illegal activities or unethical activities? The easy answer, I would say, is possibly. Do I think the governor's smart enough to cover his tracks? My answer is yes. If. So you think you still have faith in his ability to escape major problems because of his ability to escape major problems?
Because he was former U.S. attorney. The guy's not stupid, A, and B, he knows the law.
Yeah, but we've seen politicians blow stuff like that before.
Because they feel like they're invincible. That's the problem.
When you send a text message that says, time to cause a traffic problem in Fort Lee or whatever the text message was.
There's an email from her work. I believe it was from her work email.
Clearly, you are working with a thought of being invincible. I mean, there's no doubt about that, and that was one of the more shocking things about that. But yeah, I'm interested to see, because I don't, in general, with scandal like this, I'm usually surprised by how poor of a job people do covering their tracks. And from whether it's Aaron Hernandez, killing somebody and dumping the body a few blocks from his house. That's just me, seems lazy. When I kill somebody, I always dump them further away.
Obviously. Hackensack River, there's plenty in there, right?
Exactly. So,
Sag River.
But, I feel like people don't, there is an overconfidence in people's ability to think they can get away with these things. And so I don't know that, I think there's going to be more things here that are really going to affect that goodwill. Because I'll tell you right now, I think, Christie in New Jersey was at a point where he could have run for anything or asked for anything, and he would have had public support for it. Like, he had really gotten to that point as a politician, sort of almost where Bill Clinton was at the very end of his run as president, which is like, the goodwill was just, it was out there. Most of the people thought he was doing a good job, and that was kind of settled. You start talking about, people feel real strongly about the Koch brothers, and it's not, you start throwing those names around out there where people think Christie's getting his money that he won these campaigns with, or now the scandal was about diverting money from the funds for Sandy relief into basically creating, instead of, it's supposed to be a tourism commercial and making it a political commercial during the re-election. You start throwing things out there like that, and people think you're wasting money that could have gone for relief victims, spending $6 million on a commercial instead of $2 million on a commercial. I don't know. You cannot win in New Jersey if only the Republican base still has your back. Like, that's not a thing here, and you can't win nationally if only the Republican base it has your back. So those types of things with the middle are going to resonate really loudly, I think. And how do you think that's going to play out from here? I mean, is there any sense of that? Do you have any sense of that moving forward?
I think it's really too early to tell. I think he's lucky that it happened right after the election. I mean, we're talking days, a couple weeks, a couple months right after he was reelected.
Short memories, yeah.
So he's very lucky in that sense. If this had happened before November, who knows? Who knows what would have happened at the polls? I don't think Barbara Buono really honestly stood a chance. I don't. But
it's amazing. She ran for governor and no one got to know her.
I'll tell you what. She was just, I feel like she was thrown out there. I feel like there were other Democratic candidates that were more valuable, like Senate President Sweeney. A lot more people knew his name, but he didn't want to put his name out there against Governor Christie.
Because he wasn't going to be Chris Christie, right? Exactly.
I mean, she was the sacrificial lamb.
So, even if this scandal had happened during the election, we think that unless something more concrete comes out, I think Christie would have won anyway. I
really don't know, and I think it depends on when it happened as opposed to compared to the election. If it happened right before where there was no details, then he would have still gotten reelected.
Right.
If we don't know what we're going to find out down the road. So if it had happened 6 months before and all of this stuff, as we're using this word unraveled, because I think it's a phenomenal word to compare with this entire Bridgegate that we had no idea what that was happening and has completely turned the press corps' lives around for this past week and months to come. So if it had happened 6 months before the election and we found out things that we don't even know yet, you really can't tell.
So you say that this is going to turn your life upside down for months to come. Is that really what your expectation is?
I'm exhausted.
Yeah, I mean, is there a real expectation that this is going to be the prevailing story in New Jersey politics for months to come?
Absolutely. There's no other word. Because they have thousands of pages of documents to go through. And these Democrats are going to draw this out because they don't like Governor Christie. I know no one's shocked by that. And they have done everything to bring attention to all of his faults. And unfortunately for them, the New Jersey public has just not just seen the good side of Governor Christie, but they have liked him so far. And they have felt, they honestly, Governor Christie broke his trust with a lot of people in this. A lot of people feel betrayed right now. Not everyone, but some people definitely feel betrayed by this. And that is the problem.
Yeah, I think, from what I've seen, I think everyone who doesn't have skin in the game, I think if they really break down and look at this, you're going to be disappointed. There's no way not to be disappointed in, there's just no justification for this behavior. So, I guess what the Democrats have to gain then by drawing this out is just, obviously you ruin public favor. You can battle more against sentiment in terms of new bills and legislation that comes up. Do we have any sense, I know we're just finished an election cycle, but do we have any sense of who would be running for governor on a Republican or Democratic ticket 4 years from now?
Absolutely. I would say if Assemblyman John Wisniewski, who, like I said, has been spearheading this investigation, does not run in 4 years, I would be shocked. This is his ticket to the governor's office.
And that's how he sees it.
No, that's how I see it. That's my opinion. Absolutely. I don't know what he's thinking. And, if you ever asked him, he wouldn't ever admit to that at this point. You're talking 3.5 years before he even starts to run, or 3 years. But I would not be surprised. His name is out there. People don't know who Barbara Buono is. People will know Wisniewski. That name is out there now, and it's in the same sentence as Governor Christie, so a lot of people know his name, and it'll stick.
Do we know anything about him prior to this?
I mean, I've worked with him in the past on several bills. He's on the Transportation Committee, but he will, and that's what I'm talking about them riding this out, because Democrats like to make headlines. Republicans like to make headlines. Legislators like to make headlines, and that's what they will do and will try to continue to do as long as they can. I don't think that they will skew this investigation anyway to compromise it and draw it out, but I'm saying that they will try to make a headline. The littlest thing, they'll be like, oh, hey, press conference, we found this out. Oh, hey, we subpoenaed another person, press conference, everybody come and pay attention to us. Republicans or Democrats. I'm not talking about either side.
So anything that you think that you've run into here, anything else I should say that you've run into here that you think is not being talked about enough on this story?
Oh, absolutely. Where do we start? So let's talk about the people that were subpoenaed. We have Bridget Kelly, no surprise. Stepping in, no surprise. So we talk about this inner circle. Michael Druniak, he's a spokesman for the governor's office. He's always at the governor's side. Anytime the governor talks, I've had one-on-one ones with the governor, he's always there. And he always makes sure that the governor says the right thing. We have Maria Camella. She's the communications director. She's always there as well. So these are the people that are with him at all times. The only other people that I can think of that are with him more are his security detail.
Right. So these people know the truth, whatever the truth is, and now they're going to be subpoenaed to say it. So they either have to lawyer up or tell the truth.
I mean, or plead the fifth. Well, and lawyer up and plead the fifth.
Lawyering up, yeah, right.
And it's just interesting that, I mean, even Kevin O'Dowd, all of these top aides to the governor and the top officials of the Port Authority, and the governor had no knowledge. And that's where the question comes in. And like I said, I'm not saying that he's guilty at all. And to be honest, I don't know. I don't know the answer, and I'm not leaning either way.
Well, let me ask you this. So the people inside his office, these trusted advisors, would they have had the juice or the authority to orchestrate something like this with the Port Authority without the governor knowing? Like, if you're the head of the Port Authority and they go, shut down this bridge for no reason, does the Port Authority head go, okay, great, no problem, I'll take your word for it that Christie's on board? Like, is there that kind of a relationship?
Bridget Kelly, I would say, had that authority, yes. She is the deputy chief of staff. I mean, she had a lot of power. We like to think that the governor has his hands in everything, but realistically, the state of New Jersey has a lot of people in it, millions of people. You can't, and traffic, like Michael Druniak said, he can't concern himself with traffic. But when you find out after a day and you have this Fort Lee mayor and the Port Authority, I mean, there are a lot of people involved, not just the people that were stuck in traffic. You're talking about the Port Authority, the Fort Lee mayors, and the mayor said right off the bat, is this in or says something about retribution. He didn't ask. But he said, what the hell is going on?
Brought it up right away.
I mean, you can imagine that the governor's reading this in the paper and he turns to his aide and say, is this us? And then when they say, you don't want to know the answer to that, I mean, a day in, and you're talking about 4 days. So at some point, you would think that he would have been informed on something that big going on in his state.
Yeah, I mean, it's not traffic. When you talk about
it's beyond traffic.
What's going on the George Washington Bridge is not traffic.
People who don't live in New Jersey think it's just traffic. Who cares? It was a traffic jam. It was beyond traffic.
Yeah, I mean, if they had shut down the bridge for construction, is that just construction, or is that? I mean, it's not. It's a bigger deal than that. It's like, it's like saying it's only a part of West Virginia that the water supply wasn't good in, but if it's 400,000 people or 600,000 people that don't have clean water, it ends up being a big deal. So, you can make it sound very minimal when you say like, oh, he messed with traffic, but obviously.
Let's talk about this traffic study. Where is it?
Well, they're not even arguing that anymore, and that to me would have been that's the most amazing part to me, because my thought process immediately would have been like, we have to prove that we were doing something legitimate here. And then this all goes away. Like, if you can
make something up,
sure, I mean, they should have made something up before they did it. Do a real. If you want to get something back, like, why don't you do a real traffic study What's the difference in that you still get the same result, and you don't have to put yourself out there like this, because if there's something real coming out of it, there's no scandal. They made no effort. Again, it's the cockiness of it. It's the idea that you can just not even try. I don't have a lot of faith that they're going to be able to cover their tracks on a lot of this stuff, because I feel like this would have been such an easy thing to cover up from the beginning, and they basically didn't even try.
I mean, that one email, let's cause traffic problems, and I mean, come on, say, hey, you're a go, you're good,
up the phone.
You're good, yes, exactly. So my thing is that yes, it's going to play out where there was no traffic study, most likely. I can't say for sure, but the question is whether or not the governor himself gets tied into this. Right now we're in his office. He has not yet been subpoenaed, but there's been talks about subpoenaing him. But whether or not he will in fact be tied directly to this is the ultimate question, and we don't know that answer right now.
If everybody else ends up being tied in and he doesn't, does that really make a difference?
Absolutely. People have already lost faith, but if every single person in his inner office, the people that I'm talking about, that I mentioned before, if they are all tied in and found to be guilty, then New Jersey residents will make that connection themselves. They don't have to have that.
Right, but I guess that was maybe that came off wrong. What I was saying is, even if you can't prove it was him, if you can prove it was everybody else, doesn't matter if it was him. If it wasn't just one person going rogue, and right. They fired one person right now. I mean, which is I guess the idea there is they want you to buy is that this was the doing of one person who went rogue. If that ends up not being the case, then whether it's just him doing a terrible job of knowing what's going on in his office or hiring awful people, it's still his problem, right?
Yes. Ultimately, I would say yes. But the question also is, we're talking about 2016. I mean, he's got the next 3.5 years in New Jersey. He's pretty much set in New Jersey, but the question is about 2016 and this presidential run. So do people in New Jersey completely lose faith? Do they forget about it? Do they decide that they like him over this one, what some people may push aside as a teeny little scandal? Or do people say, hey, I was betrayed. This person, you can insert whatever word you want to put there. This person has betrayed my trust and is just like the other politicians that I was hoping that he wasn't.
I think the only way that if I was making a prediction, I would say the only way people move past this is if he has another Hurricane Sandy moment. If something else comes up where he can once again prove himself, and then that becomes the main storyline heading into 2014, late 2014 and 2015, as the election gets closer. Having said that, I wouldn't be surprised if everybody just kind of forgot about this stuff, and there's such a fast news cycle now. I'm surprised this already has had more legs than I maybe expected when the story first broke. I just didn't think. I guess when it first broke, it didn't seem like that big a deal to me, and then, as I said before, it's just become a bigger and bigger deal to me in my own head as I read more about it, learn more about it, and I get a little bit angry about it. So it wouldn't shock me necessarily if people moved on from this going into the election cycle, but I would be a little bit surprised, and I do think that it would take. I do think he'd be benefited, I guess, by another moment to be able to prove himself in a big spot.
Well, first off, knock on wood that there's not another Sandy or anything like that, because that was a horrible time.
Right.
But yes, I do. Like you said, it is a fast news cycle, but I don't think people will forget this, especially if they're talking about what's to come and all these subpoenas. This is going to be very interesting, what comes from these 20 subpoenas. This is sort of a make it or break it. We know what we know. And if something else is going to come from this investigation, these 20 subpoenas will determine that.
So if the story
from my opinion.
If the story dies here and we find out he definitely didn't know.
I don't think it matters right now. Jerseyans are passionate people. But
does it matter for 2016?
Yeah, would it die down by 2016 if it stopped right here and they said he had no idea? It could fizzle a little bit faster.
Anything else that our listeners need to know that we haven't covered yet about this topic?
I mean, you want to talk about the Port Authority, we can get into that.
Well, that's
a whole nother people who are just high on power, I feel. Like I said, all of this is my opinion. But the fact that these people are so high up and making top dollar and worked so hard to get to where they are to do stupid stuff like this, all to please a governor in political retribution, is just unfathomable to me.
Is there a one central person who would have been in charge of this of the Port Authority, or would there have been multiple levels of management that had to know this was happening for no reason?
I can't answer that. There's a lot of things that no one can answer. No, Bill Baroni and Mike Stepien have both been subpoenaed. We saw what came out of that.
And who were?
Bill Baroni's a former deputy executive director. They both resigned.
Right.
I mean, that right there is a red flag. The fact that they both resigned right after this was sort of surfaced.
Yeah.
Is amazing. And then when Stepien just pled the fifth all last week, it was just, it would be interesting if he was given immunity, and I want them to give him immunity because I want to know what he has to say so bad. I'm so interested to hear from his point of view what actually happened, because nobody knows what actually happened.
Yeah, and it's also interesting if you could get in on the inside and see if people in the Christie camp are trying to avoid giving him that immunity or trying to influence the political process of giving him immunity because they're afraid of what he might say. If that happens,
they should be.
Well, if listen, if you don't have anything to hide, you're not afraid of what he's going to say.
Clearly, I would say it was clear that he had something to hide when he pled the fifth.
Yeah.
He wouldn't even say where he used to work. He wouldn't even say, when they asked where his former place of employment was, he wouldn't even say where he worked.
It's hard for me to read into that because if I'm going to take the step of pleading the fifth, I'm going to take the step on everything. Like
Well, no, but he admitted to a few. They ask a few basic questions in the beginning, like your name and things along those lines, and he answered them.
Well, he probably had a list of 9 questions his lawyers gave him in front of him and said, you can answer
100%.
these 9 questions and don't answer anything else.
100%. But every single person that he used to work at the Port Authority, that was not even a question, but that was one of the basic information questions. When he started to plead the fifth on that one, even Wisniewski was kind of like, all right, so you're starting to hide stuff already. Where does this begin and end?
Well, clearly we're going to have some time to talk about that as the story continues to develop. I really appreciate you taking the time to come in here, Lois, and I enjoyed our time here very much, and I hope our listeners did as well.
Thank you.
I look forward to talking with you about this in the future.
Yes, absolutely. I'm excited.
Thanks again for coming on.